The humid Miami heat clung to my skin like a second layer as I pushed through the heavy glass doors of Maria Rosa, the exclusive waterfront Italian restaurant where I'd been working for exactly 6 months and 11 days. My white blouse was already damp beneath my black vest, my carefully pinned hair threatening to escape its bun, and the straps of my worn flats cut into my heels with every rushed step. I was already 15 minutes late for my shift. "Aria, dove sei stata?" Giulia, the floor manager, hissed in Italian as I hurried past the bar, my fingers fumbling with the tie of my black apron. Her perfectly made-up face was tight with an anxiety I'd never seen before, and Giulia never lost her composure. "The Orchid Room. You're serving it tonight." "What?" I stopped mid-knot, my stomach dropping. "But that's Natalia's section." Giulia's manicured nails dug into my forearm as she pulled me aside, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Natalia quit an hour ago. Dopo passò un bon Dieu." Her dark eyes searched mine with something that looked like fear. "Listen tu bien, Aria. The guests in Ateum, they're importante. Very importante. Don't ask questions, don't make mistakes. Just serve and smile. Capisce?" The intensity in her tone made my throat tighten. I nodded, smoothing down my vest with trembling hands and checking that my name tag sat straight. I needed this job more than air. 6 months ago, I'd fled Atlanta with nothing but 2 suitcases and a maxed-out credit card, leaving behind an engagement ring and a man whose love had slowly, methodically transformed into a cage. Miami was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to breathe again. But fresh starts came with a price tag, and my cramped studio apartment in Little Havana devoured most of my paycheck before I could even think about sending money home to Mama in Sicily. "Who are they?" I asked, grabbing my notepad from behind the bar, my handwriting suddenly feeling inadequate for whatever this was. Giulia's eyes darted toward the kitchen, then back to me. Her voice dropped even lower. "Associati of Niste Fiori." The name hit me like a physical blow. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. Everyone who worked at Maria Rosa knew about Casa de Fiori, the owner, the ghost who appeared maybe twice a year, always unannounced, always commanding absolute silence and deference from the entire staff. I'd never seen him. I'd been conveniently scheduled off during his last visit, but the stories circulated in whispered Italian among the kitchen staff. Some said he was just an incredibly wealthy real estate investor. Others spoke in darker terms. Famiglia, omerta, connections that ran deeper and more dangerous than money alone could buy. "There in the Orchid Room," Giulia continued, already turning away to greet arriving guests with her professional smile firmly back in place. "Remember, Aria, invisibile, professional, efficiente, and invisible." Invisible. That had become my expertise these past 6 months. Keeping my head down, my voice soft, my presence so minimal that people barely registered I existed. It was safer that way. Easier. I'd learned in Atlanta that being noticed meant being controlled, and I'd promised myself, never again. I took a deep breath, pressed my notepad against my racing heart for just a moment, and pushed through the swinging doors into the main dining room. Maria Rosa at night was breathtaking. Soft golden light spilled from modern chandeliers shaped like sea urchins, casting warm shadows across tables draped in cream linen. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Biscayne Bay, where yacht lights glittered like fallen stars on dark water. The restaurant exuded the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. It simply existed, confident and understated. Old European elegance transplanted to Miami's waterfront. I moved through the dining room on autopilot, spine straight, chin level, the way I'd been trained during my first week. Past the main seating area where couples murmured over wine and seafood. Past the semi-private alcoves reserved for business dinners. Down the discreet hallway, lined with black and white photographs of the Sicilian coast. At the end of the hall stood a single door of dark mahogany, brass handle gleaming under recessed lighting. The orchid room. My hand hovered over the handle. Through the thick wood, I could hear the low rumble of male voices speaking Italian. Not the sing-songy Italian of Rome or the musical Italian of the North, but the harder, more clipped dialect of Sicily. My Sicily. I closed my eyes, pulled my professional mask into place. Pleasant, neutral, forgettable, and knocked twice before pushing open the door. The office smelled of leather and expensive scotch, but what made Arya's skin prickle was the thick manila folder centered on Casan Fiore's mahogany desk. She'd followed him here after close, her legs unsteady, pulse hammering in her throat. The restaurant was silent now, the last server gone, the kitchen dark. Just her and this man, who moved through Mariawasa like he owned every tile, every breath of air. Because he did own it. All of it. Sit, he said, not looking up from the folder. Arya remained standing. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Always trust your instincts, baby. And every instinct screamed that sitting meant surrender. Casan's mouth curved. He opened the folder and began laying photographs across the desk with surgical precision. Arya at university. Arya with her mother at the hospital. Arya outside her apartment building. Her stomach dropped as he added more. Bank statements showing 3 months of late rent, medical bills bleeding red, credit cards maxed to suffocation. Stop. Her voice cracked. He looked up then, those cold green eyes pinning her in place. I know about Marcus too, how he emptied your savings before you finally grew a spine and left him. How your mother's cancer came back 6 weeks later. Stage 3, yes? Aggressive. Arya's hands clenched into fists. What do you want? 2 weeks in Sicily. You'll translate for me during business negotiations, nothing more. He slid a second folder toward her. In exchange, your mother sees Dr. Enzo Castellana in Zurich. Best oncologist in Europe. Experimental immunotherapy, private suite, round-the-clock care, everything covered. The room tilted. Why me? Because you speak Sicilian dialect like you were born there. Because you're intelligent enough to be useful and desperate enough to say yes. He leaned back. And because I've been watching you for 6 months, Arya, I know exactly who you are. The predatory certainty in his voice made her skin ice over. This wasn't kindness. This was possession, dressed up as salvation. 2 weeks, she whispered. 2 weeks, he replied. Her mother was dying. Marcus had left her with nothing. The medical bills would break her, even if she lived to be 100. I accept. Casan smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Good. Pack light. We leave at dawn. What Arya didn't see was the text message he sent after she left. Subject secured. Maintain surveillance until wheels up. The black SUV was already waiting outside her apartment. The private jet touched down in Palermo as dawn painted the Mediterranean gold and rose. Arya hadn't slept, couldn't stop replaying the moment she'd signed away 2 weeks of her life to a man whose last name she'd only learned during a flight. Fiore. The name carried weight in Sicily. Casan had explained with dark amusement. His family's roots went deep, back to when power was measured in blood and loyalty, not money. The villa perched on cliffs above Mondello, like a sleeping predator. Honey-colored stone, iron gates, security cameras disguised as decorative fixtures. Old money, older violence. Arya felt it in her bones, but Casan didn't take her there. The car drove straight to a private hospital in the city centre, all marble and hushed efficiency. Her mother's suite overlooked a courtyard garden, sunlight streaming through tall windows. She looked so small in the pristine bare, her skin paper-thin, but her eyes brightened when Arya rushed to her side. Figlia mia, her mother whispered, gripping her hand. Dr. Messina arrived minutes later, silver-haired, confident, kind. He explained the immunotherapy protocol in Care l'Italien, the promising early markers, the aggressive timeline. Everything Cassandre had promised, already in motion, already saving her. Then Cassandre entered,
and Arya watched her mother's face transform. Not surprise. Recognition. Salvatore's boy, her mother said softly in Sicilian. You held his eyes. Cassand's expression gentled in a way Arya hadn't seen before. He crossed to the bed, took her mother's frail hand with unexpected reverence. Signora Serrano, your husband was a great man. After he left, her mother's grip tightened on Arya's wrist. Your father worked for Salvatore Fiori. They were brothers in all ways that mattered. Her voice cracked. Marco died protecting him. Took 3 bullets meant for Salvatore. Cassan was there. He was just a boy, but he saw everything. The room tilted. So this is...
A Chet repaid. The Fiori family doesn't forget. Her mother's eyes searched hers. He's helping you because of what your father gave them. Nothing more. Arya nodded, throat tight. It made sense. Perfect sense she should feel relieved that his interest was transactional, rooted in honor rather than something darker and more possessive. Instead, she felt hollow. That night, alone in a guest room at the villa, she stared at the Mediterranean stretching endlessly black and told herself the ache in her chest was just exhaustion. She was a terrible liar. The emerald dress hung in Arya's room like a declaration of war, silk that cost more than 3 months of her Miami rent, cut to make her look like she belonged in this world of crystalline power. A note in Cassan's precise handwriting. Wear this, trust we. When Isabella fastened his mother's necklace around her throat, antique gold and emeralds that caught the light like promises, Arya understood. She wasn't just a translator tonight. He was a statement. That the Taglio family arrived with smiles sharp as knives. Don Emilio, silver-haired and gracious, kissed her hand too long. His sons assessed her with calculating eyes. Cassan's hand found the small of her back, possessive and warm, guiding her to the dining room where candles flickered against old stone walls. The conversation flowed like honeyed poison, business couched in pleasantries, threats wrapped in compliments. Arya translated seamlessly, her Sicilian dialect flawless, capturing every nuance. She was becoming invisible again, the way she'd learned to survive. Then Don Emilio leaned back, wine glass catching firelight, and said almost lazily, in thick Neapolitan dialect, "U trasporto di Palermo. Qualcuno sta rivartando apposta, no?" The Palermo shipment. Someone's delaying it intentionally, yes? The words hung in the air like smoke. A test, an accusation, a veiled threat, suggesting Cassan himself was sabotaging their agreement. Arya's pulse spiked. She met Cassan's eyes across the table. Dark, unreadable, waiting. In that heartbeat, she made a choice. She turned to Don Emilio with a slight smile and translated his words into formal Italian, stripping away to the dialectical implication of betrayal, rendering it as a simple inquiry about logistics. Cassan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those obsidian eyes. Understanding, gratitude, something darker. Attention shattered. Don Emilio laughed, raised his glass. The rest of the dinner passed without incident. When the guests finally departed, Arya fled toward her room. She made it to the study before Cassan's hand closed around her wrist, spinning her against the closed door. His body caged hers, fury and admiration warring across his face. You knew what he said, the real meaning. Yes. You possibly saved my life tonight. His voice was rough, accent thickening. Do you understand that? I understand that I made a choice. Her breath came shallow. I chose you. Something broke in his control. He kissed her like a man drowning, claiming, promising, warning, all at once. His hand tangled in her hair, the other gripping her waist, and Arya's entire body ignited. Then sanity crashed back. She shoved against his chest, slid to her room, locked the door. She touched her lips, still burning, terrified of how much she wanted to surrender. Isabella brought coffee to the terrace icon, her lined face kind but cautious. She'd worked for the Fiori family for 30 years, had watched Cassan grow from a grieving boy into the man who now controlled half of Sicily's underworld. She set the cup down with careful deliberation. You're not the first woman he's brought here, signorina. Arya's hand still held her cup. There have been others. Beautiful, useful,
always gone within weeks. Isabella's eyes held something like sympathy. But none wore Signora Fiori's jewelry. None had their own room. She paused. I don't know what that means. I just thought you should know. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through Arya's chest. He was special. Or he was the most elaborate piece yet in whatever game Kassan played. Either option terrified her. At the hospital, her mother looked stronger, color returning to her cheeks. The treatment was working. Over lunch in the sunny courtyard, she told Arya about the night Marco Serrano died. How Salvatore Fiori had come to their small apartment in Palermo at 3 a.m, covered in her husband's blood, sobbing like a broken man. How 15-year-old Kassan stood in the doorway, shell-shocked and silent, his father's grief filling the room like smoke.
Marco threw himself in front of 3 bullets, her mother whispered. Saved Salvatore's life, died in his arms, whispering my name and yours. Her weathered hand gripped Arya's. The Fiore family doesn't forget debts like that. Hassan was old enough to understand what your father gave. He's been carrying that weight for 19 years. The meeting in Palermo that afternoon was held in a warehouse near the port. Concrete floors, harsh fluorescent lights, men in expensive suits with violence in their eyes. Arya stood beside Kassan as he negotiated shipping routes and percentages, her translations precise and cold, but she felt the weight of every gaze on her. Assessing, calculating, she wasn't just translating, she was proof. Proof that Kassan Fiori commanded loyalty deep enough to span generations, that the daughter of his father's most trusted man now stood at his side. She was cultural legitimacy wrapped in an emerald dress and antique jewelry, a beautiful chess piece. When one of the men called her a figlia di Serrano, Serrano's daughter, with reverence, Kassan's hand found her waist, possessive, protective. She was beginning to understand that in his world, those two things were the same. The art auction in Taormina glittered with old money and older secrets. Arya had learned to read the room now. Which men held real power, which were simply wealthy, which carried guns beneath tailored jackets. The vintage diamond bracelet on her wrist caught light like ice on fire, and she'd seen 3 people recognize it already, their eyes widening before they looked away. Kassan's hand never left her waist. Possessive, protective, always both. That bracelet, she murmured as they moved through the crowd. People keep staring. Good. Let them. His thumb traced small circles against her hip bone through the silk dress. They need to understand what you are to me. Before she could ask what that meant, a man appeared in front of them, silver at his temples, expensive suit, smile that didn't reach calculating eyes. The room shifted, conversations faltering. Kassan Fiori, the man's voice was smooth as aged whiskey. What a pleasant surprise. Enzo, Kassan's entire body went rigid. I didn't realize you were invited. Last-minute addition. Enzo Marchetti's gaze slid to Arya, lingering on the bracelet. Recognition flashed across his face, sharp, predatory. And who is this stunning creature wearing Signora Fiori's diamonds? The temperature dropped 10 degrees. None of your concern. Oh, I think she's very much my concern now. Enzo's smile widened. Serrano's daughter, yes? How? Sentimental? Arya's pulse hammered. How did he know? Then she saw them. 3 men in dark suits threading through the crowd. Federal agents tried to look casual and failing. The FBI task force Kassan's security had warned about. Her stomach dropped. This was a trap. Kassan's hand tightened on her waist, urgent. His security chief appeared at his elbow, murmuring rapidly in Sicilian. Start this exit. 30 seconds. They moved fast, Kassan's team creating a corridor through startled auction guests. Arya's heels clicked against marble as they burst into a narrow hallway, then out into the humid night where a black car waited, engine running. Inside, speeding away from Taormina's glaring lights, Kassan's expression was murderous. He set us up. Forced me into arrest or a public instinct. Either way, I look weak. His jaw clenched. And now he knows about you. Knows you matter. What does that mean? He turned to her, something feral in those dark eyes. It means you're a target now. Leverage, the fastest way to hurt me. His hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness. I won't let him touch you, Arya. I burn all of Sicily first. The terrifying part was knowing he meant it literally. A helicopter rose from Palermo at dawn,
the city shrinking beneath them as they carved across impossible blue toward the Amalfi coast. Arya watched her mother's medical yacht, cutting a white wake far below, Dr. Messina and 2 nurses, ensuring her safety during the crossing. Kazan had moved her entire world in less than 12 hours. I need to tell you something, Hassan said over the headset, his voice cutting through rudder noise. The truth about what I am, what you've walked into. Arya turned to meet his eyes. A shipping company is real. The real estate holdings, the restaurants, all legitimate, all paper. His jaw tightened. They also launder money from weapons trading, strategic acquisitions, and violence when necessary. I traffic in power, Arya. I control ports, politicians, judges. People die on my orders. He held her gaze, unflinching. I'm not asking for forgiveness or understanding, just acknowledgement of what you're standing beside.
She should be horrified. Part of her was. The part of remembered being a scared girl, trying to escape Marcus, trying to be good and small and safe. But another part, older and fiercer, recognized this brutal honesty for what it was. Trust. He was giving her truths that could destroy him, trusting her with ammunition that could end his empire. Why tell me? Because Enzo Marchetti knows you matter now. Because you deserve to choose with your eyes open. Something raw crossed his face, and because I'm tired of you looking at me like you're waiting for me to become a monster. I already am one. The island emerged from morning mist. Light villa clinging to cliffs. Gardens terraced down to a private cove. Security subtle but absolute. A fortress disguised as paradise. That night, after her mother was settled in a sun-filled suite, and Dr. Messina assured them the transfer went perfectly, Arya found Kazan on the terrace overlooking the Mediterranean. Moonlight turned the water to hammered silver. You were supposed to be temporary, he said without turning. A debt repaid. 2 weeks and you'd disappear back to Miami. His hands gripped the stone railing. But then I heard you speak. Not just Italian, but the soul of it. And I saw your fire beneath all that careful silence. He finally looked at her, accent thickening with emotion. And temporary became impossible. The air between them crackled with inevitability. Arya crossed the terrace, her hand covering his on the railing. I'm still here. I know. His thumb traced her knuckles. That terrifies me more than anything Enzo Marchetti could do. 3 weeks on the island, and Arya learned the rhythm of Kazan's war. He disappeared into his office for encrypted calls to Miami and Palermo, emerged with shadows under his eyes and blood on his hands that wasn't literal, but somehow felt that way. Enzo Marchetti was building alliances, the FBI closing in, violence spreading like wildfire through territories that had been stable for years. But every night, Kazan returned to her, found her on terraces, onto the garden. His presence, both question and answer. Her mother grew stronger each day, color returning to her cheeks, laughter filling the villa. Dr. Messina was cautiously optimistic. The experimental treatment was working. Arya had what she bargained for, her mother's life. She could leave now, take her mother and disappear. Kazan had never said she couldn't. The thought made her chest ache. Evening sun turned the Mediterranean to liquid gold when Kazan found her upon their usual terrace. He stood there for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that felt like prayer. I need to ask you something, he said quietly. And I need you to be honest, even if it destroys me. Arya turned to face him fully. What do you want, Arya? His voice was rough, accent thick. Not what you think you should want. Not what's safe or smart or morally acceptable. What does your soul crave? The control she'd grown accustomed to. The possessive touches, the decisions made without consultation. The cage disguised as protection, all of it dropped away. This was genuine choice, terrifying in its completeness. She could take her mother and vanish into some quiet life. Find a teaching job, a small apartment, safety and anonymity. The girl who'd fled Marcus would choose that. The woman who'd learned to make herself small would choose that. But Arya remembered who she'd been before Atlanta. Before she learned
that wanting things was dangerous. That girl had craved adventure, passion, a life that felt like living instead of just surviving. "I want you," she said, and her voice didn't shake. "I want this. All of it. The danger, the darkness, the way you look at me like I'm your religion." She stepped closer. "I want to stop running from who I actually am. And I'm someone who chooses you." Relief and hunger flashed across his face in equal measure. Then he pulled her into his arms, one hand tangling in her hair, the other spanning her waist, like he was afraid she'd disappear. "Say mia." He breathed against her mouth. "You're mine." "Sono tua," she answered. "I am yours." Finally, she stopped running. 6 months later, Aria's mother walked out of the hospital in Palermo with Dr. Messina's cautious smile and the word that changed everything: remission. They settled her in a sun-drenched apartment overlooking the harbor, close enough for weekly checkups, far enough for independence. Her mother cried when she saw it, kissed Aria's cheeks, and whispered, "Tuo padre sarebbe orgoglioso. Your father would be proud." Aria had changed in those months. She'd learned the coded language of Kassan's world, which silences meant danger, which handshakes sealed blood oaths, how to stand beside him at negotiations, radiating quiet strength without threatening the delicate male egos that still controlled this empire. She'd learned when to translate exactly and when to soften meanings, when to meet challenging gazes and when to lower her eyes in calculated deference. She was no longer afraid of Kassan's darkness because she'd found her own. Meanwhile, Kassan moved against Enzo Marchetti with surgical precision. Alliances crumbled. Supply lines vanished. Key lieutenants disappeared or turned. The FBI investigation stalled mysteriously. Evidence contaminated, witnesses recanting. Aria watched it happen through overheard phone calls and the tension that gradually bled from Kassan's shoulders. She didn't ask questions. Some truths didn't require words. 1 year to the day after that phone call in Marea Rosa changed her life, Kassan came to her in the villa's library where she was reading. Something in his expression made her close the book. "It's done," he said simply. She knew what that meant. Enzo Marchetti's body had been pulled from Miami's Biscayne Bay that morning, weighted down, but not quite enough, discovered by a fishing boat at dawn. The news would break by evening. The authorities would investigate and find nothing. They never did. Aria should feel horror, guilt, some shadow of the girl who'd believed the world was fundamentally good. Instead, she felt only relief. "Good," she said, and meant it. Kassan crossed to her, cupped her face with hands that had ordered death, and also held her with devastating gentleness. "You're not afraid of me." "No." She covered his hands with hers. "I understand now. Your love is territorial and absolute. You'd level cities for me." "I would. No hesitation, no shame." "I know." She kissed him softly. "And strangely, terrifyingly, wonderfully, I'd do the same for you." His arms came around her, and she felt his exhale against her hair. Relief, recognition, the knowledge that she'd truly chosen him, with her eyes wide open. Some loves were worth the price of your soul. 18 months after a phone call in Sicilian changed the trajectory of her life, Aria stood in the Fiori family's ancestral chapel, with early morning light streaming through stained glass, painting everything gold and crimson. The small stone building clung to cliff sides, above the Mediterranean, older than memory, witness to centuries of vows spoken in blood and devotion. Her mother sat in the front row, healthy and radiant, tears already streaming down her face. Isabella dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. Kassan's most trusted men lined the walls: Marco, Luca, Dante, their presence both protection and blessing. No legal marriage, no photographers or society pages. Just sacred vows in front of those who mattered. Kassan stood before her in a dark suit, his expression unguarded in a way only she ever witnessed. He took her hands, and she felt the slight tremor in his fingers. The priest spoke the ancient words in Sicilian, But it was Kassan's voice that mattered. He slid his grandmother's ring onto her finger, gold etched with a pattern older than the chapel itself, and spoke with his accent, thick with emotion. Ume sangue, ume osso, ume fiato. My blood, my bone, my breath. Arya's voice didn't shake. She'd learned to be certain. Ume scudo, ame spada, ame casa. My shield, my sword, my home. The words bound them in ways no legal document could capture. This was the old way, the blood way, the way that meant something in his world.
She was no longer the invisible waitress who'd fled Atlanta with nothing. She'd become something else entirely. Kassan Fury's partner, his equal in all ways that mattered in the brutal empire they now shared. Every morning, she woke to find him watching her with wonder, like he still couldn't believe she'd chosen him. Every night, she fell asleep certain she'd made the right choice. Later that evening, back at the villa, her phone rang. She answered in Italian, instinctive now. But this time it was Kassan's voice, warm with amusement, calling from somewhere deeper in the house. Arya, vieni qui, amore mio. Arya, come here, my love. She went to him willingly, joyfully, without hesitation. Home wasn't Miami or Atlanta or even Sicily. Home was his arms around her, his heartbeat steady beneath her palm, his dangerous love that had claimed her the moment she answered a devastating call, and he'd heard not just her words, but her soul. She'd sold nothing. She'd chosen everything. And she'd choose it again. And that's where Arya's story ends, or maybe where it truly begins. From the desperate waitress answering a phone call that changed everything, to a woman who found her strength in the most unexpected place, beside the most dangerous man in Miami. Sometimes love doesn't look like safety. Sometimes it looks like a devil's bargain that becomes salvation. Sometimes the cage you choose for yourself is actually freedom. Arya Suvano walked into Marea Rosa invisible and walked out as Kassan Fury's equal. Not because he made her powerful, but because he saw the power she'd been hiding all along. If this story of obsession, choice, and finding yourself in the darkness captivated you, let me know in the comments. Would you have taken Kassan's offer? Could you love someone who operates in shadows but whose devotion is absolute? Hit that like button if you're fascinated by morally complex romance. Subscribe for more dark love stories that explore the shadows where passion and danger intertwine, and drop a comment telling me Team Kassan or Team Run Far Away. Because here's the truth Arya learned. The most dangerous love stories aren't the ones that destroy you. They're the ones that show you who you really are. Until next time, remember, some choices can't be undone. Make sure they're worth it. Ciao bellissimi. Stay bold.